Well, it depends upon your model of informed consent. I prefer to refer to valid consent. Can people give valid consent? And a colleague at NIH and I wrote a series of articles, actually, and then one of them became part of a chapter in my book. We developed what we call the fair transaction model of consent, valid consent, and contrast it with something that we refer to as the autonomous authorization model. And the autonomous authorization model sort of says, well, you'd have to be, completely voluntary, whatever that means, informed and so forth. And it's possible on the autonomous authorization model that it's very hard to get what's called, what you might call, truly informed consent. We believe the right way, and we argued in these articles that the right way to think about the problem is not autonomous authorization, but did the parties treat each other fairly? Did they have a fair opportunity to give consent? And one way we sort of backed into this by looking at other, again, that's sort of my shtick, my way of approaching questions is to say, all right, let's step back from research ethics for a minute and look at other areas of life. You go into a restaurant and the waitress says, we have several specials tonight, and she tells you what the special is, and she doesn't tell you the price. And you say, oh, yeah, that sounds good, I'll have that. Okay, and then you find that it was actually more expensive than you thought it would be. Did you consent to pay the price? Well, I mean, it's kind of a normal, everyday transaction, right? We've all been there. Did you give informed consent to purchase it when you didn't know the price? Well, probably not. Were you obligated? Did you give valid consent? Well, maybe. You had the opportunity to ask her about the price if you wanted. It could be, in this case, the responsibility was on you. Or we might just say, look, this is an area of life where we don't think full disclosure of everything is absolutely necessary. So, if people go into a casino and gamble, and they're not told sort of what the house take is, of the money bet at the roulette table, how much actually goes back to the bettor? Are they giving informed consent to when they say put their money down on black? Well, maybe not. Okay, by its autonomous authorization. Are they being treated fairly? That's another question. And so we think that we argued there that this sort of autonomous authorization model, which we think has been dominant, and actually you find in the Belmont report, is the wrong way to think about the problem. And the crucial issue is whether in getting consent, the parties have treated each other fairly. Now, what does that mean? What treating these people fairly involves differs from context to context. If I'm selling my home to you, I have obligations that I don't have if I'm selling my camera to you. If I'm selling my home to you, in most states in this country, I have a legal, and in any case, I would think one has a moral obligation to disclose defects about the house that I know of. If the roof leaks, if there's water in the basement, if there, whatever it is that may not be directly observable. I think I have an obligation to disclose. I mean, we're more rigorous in some contexts than we are in others, and I think appropriately. Okay, so we have to decide. We're not. I mean, other areas of life, when I go to rent a car, and they give me this long form, they don't expect me to read it. I don't read it. I just sign. I mean, I don't have. I mean. But is that an okay transaction? Well, in that context, we might think, yeah, that's okay. That's okay. So I think what we need to determine about consent in the research context is sort of what are people's sort of obligations to disclose, and how much is it fair to require people to know. I mean, in the medical, and here I think, by the way, there's an actual important difference between the medical care context and the research context. I actually think the obligations are greater in the research context than in the care context. I'm a bit of a, I confess, I mean, I'm an academic, I'm involved with bioethics, but when it's my own care, I'm a minimalist about consent. My doc says, I think this is what you ought to do. Okay. That's enough. I don't ask for, I mean, if I asked, they would say, but I don't necessarily want lots of information about, benefits and risks and alternatives. Now, in this case, we might say, well, I'm sort of waiving my right to give informed consent, as it were. But in the research context, I mean, but in the care context, in a way that makes sense. Look, I assume my doctor is recommending what he or she believes is in my interest.